As we grow older, the quiet spaces in our lives begin to echo louder. Memories fill the rooms our children once ran through, and the silence, once comforting, now feels hollow. Many of us long for something simple to be near our children again. We believe that proximity will bring comfort, connection, and a sense of purpose. But what if the closeness we crave is not the peace we imagine? What if, instead of healing the loneliness, it deepens it? In the teachings of the Buddha, we're reminded that attachment, no matter how noble it feels, can be the root of suffering. And in our later years, that truth begins to unfold in ways we never expected. This story is not just about growing old. It's about understanding the emotional weight we carry into old age and how we might finally put it down. Stay with me, because what follows may change the way you see everything. There comes a point in life when the weight of solitude grows heavier, not just on the body, but on the heart. After decades of hard work, of raising children and fulfilling responsibilities, many parents reach a stage where all they truly want is to feel close to the family they once built their world around. It's not a desire for grandeur or recognition. It's the simple wish to be remembered, to be needed, to be loved. And so the thought arises, soft and persistent. Maybe if I move closer to my children, I won't feel so alone anymore. For many elderly parents, this seems like the natural choice. The idea is tender and hopeful, reconnecting with the warmth of family, hearing familiar laughter echo through the walls again, feeling once more that you are part of something alive and meaningful. There's also a quiet sense of justice beneath it. After all I've given, one might think, don't I deserve to receive some love in return? With that thought, plans are made, boxes packed, and hearts lifted with anticipation. The move feels like a return not just to a location, but to love itself. And in the beginning, it often delivers. There are hugs at the doorstep, grandchildren climbing into your lap, children saying how happy they are you're nearby now. For a moment, it feels as though time has rewound and restored something precious that was lost. But this is where the truth begins to whisper beneath the surface. Because while geography can shrink the physical distance between people, it cannot by itself bridge emotional gaps. The rhythm of modern life moves fast. Your children, now adults, have built their own routines, filled with responsibilities, deadlines, and distractions. What feels like an emotional reunion to you may be, to them, just another layer added onto an already full life. And that's not because they don't love you. It's because life, for better or worse, is no longer revolving around you as it once did. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the closeness you hoped for starts to feel like something else. Days go by without a knock on the door. Messages are read, but not answered. You begin to wonder if you've come too close not to your children's hearts, but to the edges of their busy lives. It's here, in these quiet moments of reflection, that the first seeds of spiritual insight are planted. Maybe what you're yearning for isn't just nearness to your family, but a return to feeling seen, heard, and valued. Maybe the home you seek isn't in their neighborhood, but somewhere deeper, more internal. The Buddha once taught that suffering begins where expectation grows. Could it be that the very longing to be close is what blinds us from the truth that closeness is never guaranteed by distance alone? As you sit with these thoughts, let them rest gently in your heart. You're not alone in this experience. Many feel the same ache, the same longing. At first, everything feels right. The hugs are warm, the welcome sincere. There's laughter over dinner, little hands reaching for yours, and conversations that remind you of the past. You tell yourself you made the right decision, that living close to your children will finally fill the ache that distance once left. In those early months, the days carry a new sense of purpose. Your presence is acknowledged. Your name is called again, not as an afterthought, but with joy. You feel for a while as if you've been given a second chance to belong. But time has a quiet way of revealing what the heart doesn't want to see. Slowly, the weekend visits become less frequent. Conversations are shorter, more distracted. You notice your children checking their phones during dinner, your grandchildren no longer rushing into your arms. The smiles are still there, but they feel more polite now, softer, less spontaneous. And as the days pass, something within you begins to shift. You start watching the clock more, waiting for a call that doesn't come, leaving the porch light on longer, hoping someone will drop by. The loneliness you thought you left behind has returned, not because you're far away, but because you're close and still unseen. This is the subtle pain of misplaced expectation. The illusion that physical closeness would naturally lead to emotional connection. You believe that proximity would restore the warmth, but warmth can't be measured in miles or minutes. It lives in presence, in attention, in being truly felt. And when those things begin to fade, the absence cuts deeper than before. Because now, it's not just distance that separates you. It's the realization that your place in their lives is no longer central. You sit in the same room, yet feel miles apart. You hear their voices, yet ache for meaning behind their words. And in those quiet, aching hours, you begin to ask yourself the hardest questions. Was I wrong to come here? Have I misunderstood what it means to be needed? In Buddhist teaching, the heart of suffering often lies in clinging to what is changing. The Buddha reminded us, what you are is what has been caused. What you will be is what you do now. And right now, many elders find themselves caught in that very space, trapped between what they gave and what they hoped would return, not in riches or praise, but in simple human connection. And when that connection is missing, it's not just the body that feels cold, it's the soul. If this reflection speaks to something you've felt in your own life, you are not alone. There are so many walking this same path, quietly wondering where they belong now. If these words resonate, share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else may be searching for the courage you've just found. There is a quiet thought that often hides beneath our longing for closeness. After everything I've done for them, they should be there for me now. It's not always spoken aloud, but it lingers in the background, like a soft ache. You remember the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the dreams you set aside so your children could pursue their own. You were there for every fever, every scraped knee, every broken heart. And now, as age has slowed your steps and softened your voice, you find yourself waiting not just for company, but for some unspoken form of repayment. This expectation doesn't come from bitterness, but from love. A love so deeply given that it quietly begins to ask for something in return. Not out of greed, but out of need. Out of the hope that you still matter just as much as you once did. But here lies the subtle danger when love turns into a silent debt. It begins to distort the purity of the bond. You start keeping track, not on paper, but in your heart. How often they visit, how long they stay, whether they really listened when you spoke. You find yourself comparing what you gave to what you're receiving now, and somewhere inside, it starts to hurt. Not because your children are cruel or uncaring, but because they are no longer the small, wide-eyed beings you once held in your arms. They are navigating a world of their own, now filled with pressures, fatigue, and fears they may never share with you. Expectation, even when born from love, can become a heavy chain. And when it's unmet, the result is often not just sadness, but resentment. You might catch yourself wondering, how can they not see me? How can they be so distant? And in those moments, the mind can quietly shift from tenderness to disappointment, from generosity to grievance. The Buddha once said, attachment is the root of suffering. And in expectation, we see a different kind of attachment not to a person, but to an outcome, to a version of love we believe we deserve. But life doesn't always give us what we think we've earned. It gives us what it gives, and our peace lies not in changing that, but in how we respond. Maybe the deeper truth is this: your children don't owe you a certain number of visits or a specific kind of affection. What they owe you, perhaps, is simply the space to live their own lives just as you once did yours. And what you owe yourself, more than anything, is the freedom to love without conditions. If this reflection has stirred something tender in you, know that it's okay. These feelings are deeply human, and you're not alone in carrying them. There is a kind of waiting that doesn't live in the body. It lives in the soul. It begins innocently enough, waiting for a knock at the door, a message, a warm voice saying, "I've been thinking of you." But over time, this waiting becomes something deeper, more consuming. It becomes a quiet way of life, where your sense of meaning slowly attaches itself to someone else's attention. Not because you're weak, but because the absence of connection starts to feel unbearable. The truth is, emotional dependence doesn't arrive all at once. It builds, like dust gathering on a forgotten windowsill. One day, you realize you no longer make plans for yourself. You wait to be included in someone else's. You no longer reach inward for comfort. You reach outward, hoping someone will bring it to you. And when they don't, it's not just disappointment you feel. It's something quieter, more painful, a sense that you are fading in the world, becoming invisible. This is the silent danger of dependence. It trades your inner compass for an external anchor. And when that anchor is absent, you drift. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a story about a man who carried a heavy sack of grain from village to village. The burden was great, and he often complained. When offered help, he declined, saying, "If I do not carry this weight myself, I will never gain the strength to walk alone." This is not a lesson in pride, it's a lesson in empowerment. In relying too heavily on others for our emotional well-being, we unknowingly surrender our own strength. We begin to believe we cannot find peace unless someone else brings it to us. But no one, no matter how much they love us, can be the constant source of our happiness. It's understandable, especially in old age, to long for support and reassurance. We all want to feel remembered, to feel that our presence still matters. Yet when we place the full weight of that need onto someone else's shoulders, our children's, our spouses, our friends, we not only risk disappointment, we also risk forgetting who we are without them. Dependence is not just a burden on others. It is a quiet erosion of the self. And perhaps the most painful part is that it often grows unnoticed, beneath layers of hope, love, and longing. But even this realization is not cause for shame. It is an invitation. An invitation to return gently to your own center, to rediscover the quiet inner strength that carried you through decades of life. You were once the one others leaned on. That strength is not gone. It may simply be waiting to be remembered. Sometimes. Healing begins not with grand decisions, but with small choices: brewing tea for yourself, tending a garden, sitting in silence, not because no one is calling, but because you are listening to yourself for the first time in a long time. And in that moment, you begin to see maybe peace isn't something that comes from being remembered by others, but something that comes from finally remembering yourself. For one elderly man, these quiet realizations did not just stay as thoughts, they began to settle deeply into his heart. He, like so many others, had waited by the door, longed for connection, and silently carried the ache of being unseen. But somewhere in the hush of those long afternoons, something inside him began to shift. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gently, like leaves turning in the wind. And that gentle shift marked the beginning of a different kind of journey, not outward toward others, but inward toward himself. It was here that his real transformation would begin. It was not the house, the neighborhood, or even the family that brought him peace. It was the moment he stopped reaching outward and turned inward. After so many quiet afternoons filled with waiting, he finally sat still, not in anticipation, but in presence. There, under the soft shade of a tree, with no one watching and nothing scheduled, he began to see that the peace he had longed for wasn't lost. It had only been misplaced. It wasn't in his children's words, their visits, or the rhythms of their lives. It was something far more personal, far more sacred. It was within him all along. For so long, he had believed that closeness meant connection, that love required proximity, that his happiness must be tied to how much he was seen by others. But as the weeks turned into stillness, he began to realize that happiness rooted in others is like chasing sunlight through the trees. Beautiful. Yes, but always shifting, always out of reach. The Buddha taught, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. And finally, those words no longer felt like a quote to admire, they became a lived truth. In that stillness, he stopped counting how often they called. He let go of measuring love by appearances. Instead, he began to notice what had been quietly waiting for him all along: the gentle warmth of the morning sun, the birdsong outside his window, the small pleasures of sipping tea alone, not in loneliness, but in calm. Slowly, life became full again, not because others changed, but because he changed his way of seeing. This shift was not dramatic, nor immediate. It was tender, almost imperceptible, a soft reorientation from the outside world to his inner one. He no longer asked, "Why haven't they come?" but instead, "What can I do with this moment?" He began to journal his thoughts, revisit memories with gratitude rather than longing, and walk slowly without needing a destination. And through these acts, he found something that felt almost forgotten: contentment. There was a profound freedom in no longer expecting others to fill the empty spaces. In its place came something richer, a quiet companionship with himself. He remembered that he had survived loss, loneliness, and life's uncertainties before. He remembered the strength that had carried him through earlier storms. It had never left him. He had simply stopped looking inward long enough to notice. And so, he lived his days no longer waiting, but observing, savoring, embracing. When his children visited, he welcomed them with joy. When they didn't, he no longer felt abandoned. His love became unconditional, his presence grounded. The home he had long searched for was not built of bricks and walls, nor held in the hands of others. It was a sanctuary within. There is a deep, enduring comfort in knowing that peace is not something you earn or must chase. It is something you remember, something you return to. And once found again, it no longer depends on who comes and goes, but simply on your willingness to sit quietly and be with yourself. With time, a gentle transformation unfolded not in the world around him, but in the way he related to it. He no longer waited by the window, nor checked the phone in anticipation. His heart, once heavy with expectation, had softened. He had stopped measuring love by how often his children called or visited. In its place, he found something quieter, but more profound: the ability to love freely, without needing anything in return. And in that freedom, a deep peace began to take root. Letting go, as he came to understand, didn't mean giving up or turning away. It meant loosening the grip on how things should be, how others should behave, how life was supposed to unfold. It meant allowing people to live their own stories, without weaving himself into every page. It meant recognizing that love does not have to control in order to be real. Love, in its purest form, gives space. And when he gave that space to his children and to himself, something unexpected happened. The relationship began to breathe again. Without pressure or unspoken guilt, the visits felt lighter, the conversations more honest. His children sensed the shift too, no longer burdened by their father's silent expectations. They came not out of duty, but out of genuine affection. In releasing the emotional tension, he had opened the door to a more natural, authentic bond, one no longer shaped by past roles or obligations, but by mutual presence and trust. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." And so he began releasing more than expectations. He released the stories he had told himself about who he was supposed to be in this season of life. He was no longer the aging father waiting to be needed. He was simply a human being alive, aware, and at peace. This letting go wasn't easy. It came with moments of grief, with quiet tears and memories that surfaced when he least expected them. But even those moments were met with compassion now. He didn't push them away. He let them pass through, like rain on a window, knowing that everything, including sadness, was part of life's weather, temporary, passing, necessary. And so, day by day, he embraced the ordinary without disappointment. A cup of tea was no longer just a pause, it was presence. A solitary walk was no longer lonely, it was peaceful. He no longer needed life to look a certain way to feel full. That was the true freedom he had never known he was missing, the freedom to live without needing to fix, change, or control. What emerged in the absence of clinging was not emptiness, but clarity. And in that clarity, joy returned, not as excitement or event, but as a soft rhythm beneath daily life. The rhythm of breathing without grasping, loving without demand, and existing without apology. And in that rhythm, he rediscovered the quiet joy of simply being in the stillness he had come to know. A final understanding emerged, not sudden like lightning, but soft, like the slow unfurling of dawn. He realized that life, in all its beauty and sorrow, had simply come full circle. He had once held tiny hands, teaching his children how to walk, how to speak, how to live. Now, they were walking their own paths, far from the orbit of his care. He no longer needed to be their guide. Instead, he had to become his own. It was not abandonment, as he once feared. It was simply the unfolding of life's rhythm, a rhythm he had once been the center of, and now must step back from with grace. There was peace in this letting go, not because it was easy, but because it was true. The Buddha taught, all compounded things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence, and so he did not with effort to change anything, but with quiet devotion to accept what had changed. He began to see impermanence not as loss, but as movement, not as something to grieve, but something to witness. Each chapter in life had its own integrity. His time as a parent, as the center of the household, had passed. But something new had arrived, not less important, only less visible, a season of self-reflection, a time to ripen. He no longer needed others to remind him of who he was. He could feel it for himself in the silence of morning, in the careful way he brewed his tea, in the deep breath he took before closing his eyes at night. He had become his own companion. The roles and identities that once defined him, father, protector, provider, had all gently fallen away. And what remained was the essence of the man he had always been aware, compassionate and quietly resilient. This is the wisdom that only time can teach, that letting go is not failure, that solitude is not emptiness, and that aging is not a diminishing of worth, but a returning to the self before all roles, before all titles, a return to presence. When his children did visit, he no longer hoped for long conversations or constant praise. He met them where they were with open hands, not clinging ones. He cherished their presence, but did not depend on it. And when they left, he did not feel empty. Instead, he returned to the quiet richness of his own life, knowing it was full, even in their absence. In the end, his life became a quiet teaching, not in words, but in the way he lived. He showed that peace is possible, even when the world changes around you, that love can remain, even when closeness fades, that meaning can deepen, even in stillness. He had not lost his children. He had simply released the version of them he once held, and in doing so, had found something far greater, a life lived with grace, humility, and peace. And so the circle closed, not with sorrow, but with reverence, with the quiet understanding that nothing is permanent, and that this truth, when embraced, does not take away, it sets us free. In the end, this story is not just about one man, or even about growing old. It's about learning to let go with grace, to love without clinging, and to find peace not in the arms of others, but in the stillness of our own being. Life will always move forward. Children will grow. Roles will shift. Silence will come. But none of that means we are any less whole. In truth, it is often in solitude that we remember the sacredness of our own presence. If this journey has touched something quiet within you, may it stay with you long after the video ends. May it remind you that even in impermanence, there is meaning. Even in distance, there is love. And even in solitude, there is peace. Stay with us here at Awakening Insights, where every story is a mirror and every insight a gentle step home.